believe there are, or are you aware of any endeavors to promote an official first contact scenario with the intelligence behind the UAPs that are being seen and monitored?
Well, first of all, is this first contact? Is the first question. We don't know. Maybe we've had contact. I live here in Wyoming, and the indigenous people here in the area, many have claimed have had contact for thousands of years with these things. So is it first contact? Are we planning? I don't know. I think, it's certainly something that we need to consider. But I think we also need to consider the alternative, and maybe that we've had close and continuing contact in various stages of our human development over a longer portion of history. Again, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this, but I want to be careful that we don't, put ourselves into a little tight corner, and then we kind of paint ourselves into that corner. Yeah, there are organizations and people that are looking at this as, hey, are we getting to a point where we're reaching critical mass that we need to start considering a contingency where we realize we're not alone, right? Whatever that looks like. Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation. The Rand Corporation had looked at this quite some time ago. There's been multiple studies on this. Is there one ongoing right now? Not that I'm necessarily aware of. But then again, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's a providence of the government. I'm not sure I need the government necessarily speaking on my behalf. If there is contact with, let's say, another species, that might work good when we're engaging China or Russia or the Philippines or somebody else from a diplomatic perspective. But maybe this isn't the case. Maybe this isn't government's purview to do that. Some people have claimed that they've already made contact. I can't prove or disprove that. But if that's the case, then that would be indicative of the fact that whatever this is doesn't really give a hoot about our diplomatic status and who we decide to use as a mouthpiece to speak on our behalf. It's going to engage whoever and whatever it wants to engage. With or without our permission. Maybe DC, maybe Washington isn't the right place to have people engaging this if whatever this is, should the time come. Maybe it should be people like you.
Have we intercepted communication between UAPs, and or has there been communication with UAPs?
I'm not aware of any interception of communications with UAPs. As far as communication with UAPs, once again, and I kind of hate to split hairs here. I don't want to upset anybody, but let's be specific. What does communicate mean? I mean, you and I are having a conversation in English and we're communicating, but if I stand behind a wall and I aim an assault rifle at you, am I communicating with you? Yeah, I am. I'm communicating an intent or a threat, right? If a dog growls and shows its teeth to you as you try to kneel down and pet it, is it communicating? Yeah, it's communicating. It's telling you, hey, I don't want to be pet right now. Don't touch me. So, if a UAP is behaving in a provocative manner, meaning it's obviously knows that we are aware that it is there, and doesn't seem to mind, doesn't seem to try to hide itself. In some cases, it's been perhaps hovering over one of our military equities for a prolonged period of time. Is that communication? Well, I would submit to you, yes, it's probably communication. It's not verbal communication, but it's signaling some sort of intent. Yes, I know you're there, and yes, I know you know that I'm here, and I'm okay with that. And I want you to know that I'm here. Now, what's the rationale? What's the reasoning intent behind it? We don't know, but that is communication. When we do a show of force, and if we fly an SR-71 at 100,000 feet and we don't want the enemy to see us, but if I take a couple F-22 Raptors and I fly off the coast of, let's say, a disputed territory in the South China Sea, I'm communicating with a country. It may not be through dialogue, but make no mistake, I'm communicating very clearly and very effectively my intent. to another party. And so I think therein lies the question: are these things trying to communicate with us? And if so, will we be smart enough to recognize it as some sort of communication versus just two ships passing in the night? I do think that the more brazen that these incidents become, the more there may be an attempt to try to communicate. They obviously, whatever it is aware that we are there, and we are aware that they're there.
Are you aware of any more or of any less coarse-grained communication? For example, we can communicate with the cheetah, like you mentioned. We can point a gun at it, or we can show our hostility or our civility. Is there verbal, as far as you know, has there been any verbal or even telepathic direct communication?
I'm sorry, my audio just cut off.
Has there been any verbal or telepathic communication? I know that there's a story about, I think, Zimbabwe, Africa, with aliens communicating with some children.
There's certainly reports of it. Doesn't mean that it's see, the problem is subjective. We don't know for sure. It's the human's interpretation of what's going on. And here is why we have to be so careful. As you know, in a scientific experiment and in a closed system, the likelihood of human error is increased significantly. And so, we have to be cognizant of that. Is there some sort of real communication, as you say, telepathic communication occurring, or is it a similar effect to, let's say, taking a hallucinogenic drug and having some sort of experience, right? Mental experience. I don't know the answer to that. The answer could be yes or both or none. It could be that there is, it's just our impression of what's going on, and it's not real, right? Like a near-death experience, a lot of people report it being real. A lot of people say, no, it's just parts of the mind that are beginning to shut down, and you start, having these experiences. I don't think anybody really knows for sure, other than the people who've actually experienced it. When you talk to them, they feel very compelled that they've had a real event. And I don't doubt for 1 minute they actually believe they've had some sort of communication. And by the way, that could be the case.
Right.
Again, there's no way to prove it or disprove it. So it's interesting. But we didn't focus on that part of AATIP because it's too subjective. You can't quantify and qualify that data like you can with radar data and photographic evidence, et cetera. So it wasn't particularly useful. Not that I'm saying it's not interesting. It just wasn't useful for our calculus.
As to the connection between psychedelics and aliens, or psychedelics and UAPs, you're unaware of any credible, verifiable, falsifiable data?
Well, look, I mean, now we're getting into the world of consciousness, and I would submit to you, is not everything we do a result of a conscious process occurring in our brain? By very definition, everything I do in life is a result of some sort of willful intent based upon a consciousness process occurring in my brain, just like you and everybody else. So, we realize that human consciousness is an area that we're just now beginning to explore, and we understand even less. Is it possible that human consciousness is part of a universal consciousness, and that we can tap into this? It's not human consciousness is not only for humans. Possibly. I mean, there's people out there who have pet cats and dogs. I'm one of them, where you have a connection with your pet, not because it's just a cat or a dog, but because there's something deeper that you are connecting with, something far more intimate, something far more sacred than just a furry little bag of skin and hairballs. There's something. And by the way, that life form recognizes you as well as a sentient being. There's this appreciation that, hey, we're on the same wavelength. I may not look like you, I may not act like you or talk like you, but we're kind of the same thing. We're both conscious, sentient beings, and we recognize that in each other. And that they also may explain human interactions as well. So consciousness may not be something that is only owned and defined by the human species. Is it possible there's other things? If we can communicate with dolphins, and cats, and dogs, and birds, and gorillas, maybe human consciousness isn't quite so. Maybe it's not so special. Maybe it's indelible. Maybe it's something that's part of all of nature. And when I say all of nature, even beyond this planet, perhaps.
But I don't think I've ever asked you anything about the Rua Zimbabwe case. where a UAP appeared next to a school, and a lot of witnesses, children, saw not just the UAP, but also to life forms, to humanoid life forms. Is that anything you have ever investigated?
Well, I would ask you a question as well. Are you aware what was close to that school? What was in close proximity to that school?
No, I don't know.
A uranium mine.
Right. Okay. A uranium mine. And I know there were a lot of witness accounts even the day before at nighttime, people seeing, UAPs flying around. But all of these child witnesses, did you guys, or yeah, I know for a fact a psychologist went up there, a Harvard psychiatrist, I'm sorry, did a lot of interviews, and he said the kids were truthful. It wasn't like a mass hysteria, or they were fed information. And they still actually talk about it a lot. Even James Fox in his film The Phenomenon, he interviewed a lot of them as adults. But I think this is one of the most impactful events because of all of those witnesses ever. So that must have been very interesting for AATIP or for you and the people you work with to really get into that. But you already said there was a uranium mine. So this might have been, like an energy pit stop for these things or something. And why would they show themselves to children?
Well, again, we don't know. What's interesting is that, again, you have this potential nuclear connection, right? Technology and whatnot. It's just. I think it's certainly worth exploring. It's interesting that you have this massive sighting in and around an area where there's a uranium mine. Is there a connection? We do believe that there is a nuclear connection of some sort between UAP activity and nuclear technology and capabilities and power and weapons.
Yeah.
Question is what is that? What is the interest? Why? It's again, there's some theories right now. Completely, it's pure conjecture at this point. But some of them seem pretty reasonable.
Okay. So there was also a lot of accounts of these children saying, these creatures or beings were communicating with them telepathically, which a lot of them said. Is this something you have ever heard before? That there was a sighting and there was like they said there was communication like that telepathically.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I think. Once again, I think to take the woo out of the conversation, animals communicate non-verbally,
Right,
and it's a part of their survival. Whether it's birds, dogs, cats, there are these non-verbal cues that animals can communicate with each other. To us, it seems like magic because we don't perceive it, and it seems kind of bizarre. But it's possible that humans, maybe long time ago, had the same type of survival technique. And as we've developed language and we become more of a global community, the need for us to have that became less and less important as our vocabulary began to become more dominant. And so, very much like the human appendix, is it possible that it's a vestigial capability that we no longer use it, but some people still have it, maybe.
So you shared intelligence regarding the retrieval of exotic materials and biomaterials. In your opinion, is there a possibility that we might have found a written language embodied in exotic materials? And if so, in your opinion, could we hope to read it?
Ooh.
Well,
and that'll be the final question, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go to what written language is. Okay, written language is nothing more than a form of communication. And just like we're having this conversation now, I'm using my voice to communicate a thought. When I use a pen, I'm using a pen to communicate a thought. So written communication is a tool
that allows us to communicate with each other without using our ears, right? Our ears are used for verbal language, or we use our eyes to decipher written language, okay? But at the end of the day, it's just communication. There are all sorts of ways to communicate with an individual, with a person, even an animal, a dog, a cat, a bird, right? If you see a dog looking at you and it starts snarling its teeth, it's communicating an intent. Okay. And that intent, you know damn well what it is. Okay. Even though a dog is a completely different species and the brain is wired different than ours, we can still interpret that communication. Just like if I'm across the hall and I go like this to you, I wave to you, I'm communicating with you. Okay. I may not be speaking, saying, hey, what's up there? Rather, but what I'm doing is communicating an acknowledgement. Hey, I'm here. You're there. I see you. What's up? Right. So as far as written language, we have to presume that anything that uses a written language, it's a logical presumption, not a fact, but it'd be a logical presumption that written language is there because an animal is using eyes, visual cues to communicate. Okay. That's what written language is used for. Otherwise, it's useless. You have to be able to see in order to understand written language, unless you're talking Braille. But that's not written language. That's a texture language, right? That's a tactile language.
Yeah.
So, is it possible that there are other species that have eyes like ours, complex and compound eyes with cones and rods, and they communicate that way? Well, when you look at all the species on Earth, a large majority of species, now we're not talking about microbial species, I'm talking about larger complex species with a vertebra, have eyes. That seems very common, whether it's a snake on the ground or it's a bird in the sky or a fish in the sea or a human being, right? The eyes have been with us as an evolution from a very early stage of organism development on this planet. It is part of a lot of complex species, most species, in fact. So it's probably not uncommon for us to presume, if it's so common here on this planet, it may very well be common for another life form, if another life form exists. And so therefore, again, I know I'm not answering your question directly because I have to be careful. I'm not going to go into specifics, but is it possible that there is written language for another species? Yeah, it actually could be quite probable. And so the question is, we have to speak the language, right? Symbols on the side of a desk can mean all sorts of things. I have a flag up here that's a symbol, right? There's no written words on it, but you know what it means, right? Well, if I was an alien species coming down here and I saw that for the first time, I would have no idea what the hell that means, right? There wouldn't be that symbology behind it. So we have to be very careful when we talk about written language, because what we consider written language may in fact not be written language at all. It may be actually something else.
I'm going to go and ask, are you aware of any attempts to bait these objects, to draw them in? And I don't mean necessarily through a consciousness CE5 thing. I mean like more of a military aspect.
Yes.
Okay. I don't suppose you're able to talk about that, or no? Okay, no, moving on.